Committee Room 29, sound. 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 Committee Room 29. 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 Sound. Committee Room 29, Sound. Committee Room 29, Sound.
Received a thumbs up from broadcasting, but assume open.
Okay, good morning, members. And to Fáilte Rómha Lig, we have a quorum, and I now call the meeting of the Committee for Communities to order. I would like to welcome all members to this meeting this morning. Can I remind everyone in the public gallery that mobile phones must be turned off. Mobile tablet devices can, however, be used through a Wi-Fi connection, and all devices should be muted. Password details are available there in the gallery for anyone wishing to connect to the Assembly's Wi-Fi network. No recordings or photographs are to be taken. Can I remind members about the protocols regarding the use of electronic devices? Please switch all mobile devices to airplane mode and activate your Wi-Fi connection. Members also, I'd like to remind you in terms of using your tablet device, please do so discreetly and in a way which doesn't interfere with the proceedings, and be aware of cameras when using tablet device. And again, remind members about the sensitivity of the microphones. Finally, members, I'd like to remind members of your responsibility to declare any interest in relation to any of the items under discussion today. Do any members wish to declare any particular interest? Brian?
Well, I don't know if some, I think it's my register of interest, but I'm a director of the Greater Shankill Partnership, just received Neighbourhood Renewal funding.
Okay, thank you. Ciara?
Just to note, I would have managed a number of neighbourhood renewal projects in my previous job.
Thank you, Ciara. And Brian, thank you. Members, we will have a confidential briefing later in the meeting in closed session, and I would ask that you wait for confirmation from the clerk that we have gone into closed, and that when that item is finished, then we will be moving back into open session. So, members, agenda item apologies then, clerk, please.
Morris Bradley and Kelly Armstrong.
Thank you, and I believe Daniel McCrossing will be attending on Zoom remotely on Zoom. Thank you. Agenda item 2 then, members, chairperson's business, and I just want to raise something, members, that just has literally arisen this morning as a result of the earlier news programme around families who have been granted asylum and then become effectively removed from their housing, and it sounds like serious, significant disruption for children, particularly, almost at the point where you feel now you have been granted safe asylum, your life is thrown into turmoil again, and obviously disrupting ability for children to maintain relationships, attend school, even just attend school. So it seems like a confused system. I'm not overly clear on it. I think maybe we should write to both the Home Office and the Housing Executive to ask how they're coordinating that transition phase, and how they can maybe coordinate better to ensure that those families are provided with stability and continuity and support. So if members are content, maybe we write to seek some clarity on those issues. Brian?
Yes, and maybe also write directly to mayors who have the contract from the Home Office to provide housing. I mean, this has been raised with me by other people, and when I've looked into it, the suggestion that they were, once they were given a right to leave or leave to remain, that they lost their accommodation straight away. I understand there is some notice that's given, but yes, they're then in the hands of the Housing Executive to find them accommodation. And I'm a governor on Malvern Primary School, which has quite a number of pupils in those circumstances, and some are moved quite far distance, but also just go into another period of uncertainty. So it'd be helpful if we ask mayors to clarify what is the procedure once someone is given leave to remain.
Yeah. Thank you, Brian. Members content with that, Sean?
I think just as a reminder is that people who are seeking asylum, these are children who have seen trauma, and to be in, and if you heard the news programme this morning, they're in a school for 3 to 5 years. They've developed relationships. They've got that support. They've been put into a community. To have that removed it's just really difficult. But I understand there are families who have moved up the north coast. It seems to be quite a high proliferation there as well. So it's on both sides. The support needs to be happening on both sides as well, because you have communities where these young people and children are being parachuted in without any relationship and stability.
Yeah, it seems sort of almost particularly cruel that just at the point where you say you're now safe, all of a sudden you're back into turmoil and disruption and those very important relationships. Given the traumas, as you said, Sian, given the traumas those families will have already experienced to be here and who have gained asylum status. So, okay, thank you, members. That's great. There's nothing else then for chair's business, so I'll move on to draft minutes, which are contained at page 6 there of the meeting pack. Are members content to agree the minutes as drafted?
Great.
Thank you, members. Matters arising, members, then some matters for consideration in both the main pack and the table pack this week. So going through the main pack first, at page 14 there's a reply from Derry City and Strabane District Council to committee queries on equality screening for hybrid working regulations. The reply states any decision to amend standing orders would be required to be equality screened. Do members have any comments, or are they content to note?
Noted.
Go ahead, Melissa.
I'd just like to comment now, it would be useful if this committee is informed just of the quality screening outcomes for the different councils and that as well too, in relation to hybrid working, because it is, I would think, critical in particular in the rural areas, for the involvement of women in that in politics in the very first instance, but that the impact it will have on councillors in particular being more efficient in their role, more economically practical in that as well too, so that hopefully the councils will be able to implement this in each and every area.
Thank you, Melissa. Anyone else on that, or members content then? Yeah, thank you. At page 15, members, there's a departmental reply to a committee request for a copy of the finalised report from the Strategic Review of Sport NI, which is currently been undertaken by Deloitte. The reply states that the strategic review is still underway. However, once the final report is received and considered by the Minister, it will be shared with the committee. Do members have any comments or content to note? Content, thank you. Members, page 16 then, there's a housing executive response to committee queries in relation to whether the purpose of the housing transfer application form is to ask equality questions or housing need, requesting that the guidance for applicants, contractors and architects to support the contractor appointment stage as part of the warranted builder change process be sent to all MLA offices, providing further information and signposting in relation to the criteria for house building after committee raised concerns that housing associations are being prevented from building houses due to the criteria, and whether there are any plans to engage in-house occupational therapists in order to be able to undertake adaptation assessments. So members, in relation to that item on the criteria, I think it is actually significantly light on information there, and it is a particularly key issue. I think it will be a big part of it going forward. So I was struck maybe it would be useful if we see about getting a briefing from the Housing Executive in relation to that particular area. Members content with that? Yeah.
Which question?
In terms of the house building criteria, we had raised the issue about housing associations. The house building criteria is not a lot of detail there, and I think it's a key part of the picture. So we'll maybe get a briefing on that from the Housing Executive.
Okay.
And particularly the place shaping team, I think, quite important. Yep. Just to get an insight to the exact criteria and how they work through that process.
Okay. Okay, so members then content to note the rest of it along with that?
Just to be comment on obviously we did mention, and all of us have seen the delays regarding OTs, and particularly then in relation to the impact that has on someone actually being able to apply for disability facilities grant. So we did think it's something like an in-house to kind of, and obviously there is a current review of the disabled facilities grant, so it'd be really, really useful just to maybe, once that's complete, that we asked that we could receive a copy, or even the outcome of the consultation process, because I know that's ongoing at the moment. I'd be really, really keen to keep an eye on that and see where that is, and how improvements can be made to the disabilities facilities grant.
Yeah. Okay, members, yeah, thank you. Then at page 20, there's a reply from Antrim and Newton Abbey Borough Council on equality screening for the hybrid working regulations. That reply states the Council will carry out equality screening on the regulations. Members have any comments or content to note? Content, thank you. Page 21, there's a departmental reply in relation to overpayments of carers' allowance. That reply states that the department has a number of processes in place to assist with the early identification of overpayments, which are outlined in the reply. It states that, as with all social security benefits, there is an onus on the customer to advise the department of changes to their circumstances. The reply further states that the department does not currently have access to the DWP's verification of earnings and pension system, which provides real-time earnings based on information held by HMRC, but has engaged with DWP about whether access can be provided, the potential lead time for implementation of the system, and any associated costs. For those carers allowance customers who are repaying an overpayment and who are experiencing financial difficulty, the Department's debt management team will provide support to agree affordable and sustainable repayment plans, to waive an overpayment in exceptional circumstances, and to signpost to independent debt advice. And I suppose I want to just make a comment on this myself, members, particularly in relation to the work of carers NI in sort of flagging up this significant issue, and I think the scale of it now and the amount of people and the amount of overpayments involved do indicate it has been a significant issue. I do think the department have provided a detailed response, and I welcome the fact that they're looking at waiving where they can, at sustainable repayment plans. It's vital, I think, members, that carers who are already under significant pressure aren't put under an additional burden or distress or anxiety in relation to overpayments. And I do believe that, given again the amount of it, that there is a fundamental, like a systemic issue there that needs to be addressed. So I would urge the department to continue to work on that. I would urge the department to work very closely with carers and indeed with carers representatives to ensure that this can be mitigated and managed in a way which provides support for those all-important informal unpaid carers. So any other comments, Sian?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as you say, Chair, to give credit to Carers NI, the fact that this was raised through a Freedom of Information request, and the figures show 6,514 people are currently being referred to the Department for Communities Debt Management Department. I just think, and when you look at how much the average repayment is having to be, it's nearly a third of their annual income as this benefit. I would really like to know, and I do welcome the depth of information we've got there. I think I would really welcome just a wee bit of information about what the barriers are to accessing the verification of earnings and pension system, and what steps are being taken by the department. I think if we get a timeline of when we think that information would be coming through to us. I think that the fact that at the minute we have had it confirmed that there's actually no kind of computer system that's flagging these overpayments is just really worrying, and I think it shows that systemic issue of how many there are. The other thing that I was wondering, Chair, if it would be appropriate after recess, we should hopefully have a new minister for DWP in place. Would it be appropriate to send some kind of query about the rationale behind this not being a tapered benefit? Because I think that's where these issues have come from. The fact that every other benefit we have, if you earn a couple of pounds over, your benefit is tapered to take that into consideration. The carers allowance is the only one that I know of, I'm happy to be corrected, that is non-tapered. Earn a penny over and that's you've lost your allowance. So I think if there was some way of this committee maybe asking for the justification of that and the reasoning behind why that's a non-tapered benefit, I think that would be really good information for us to have anyway.
Yeah, actually, yeah, and I'd fully support that, Shannon. I have to say, I think that's a good suggestion, and I would add to it in the sense of, you also have a situation where carers cannot avail of training or education, and leaving them in a particularly vulnerable position when that caring role might end in terms of the next stage of their lives. So this clearly is a benefit that doesn't work in many ways, and I think we should ask DWP, are they undertaking a review of the system, of the levels of how it's operating, given that carers out there are providing, and the support they provide both here and across the water is supplementing and reinforcing the entire health service, and it's often fallen on there. So I think we should ask whether DWP, in the aftermath of the election, have plans to look more fundamentally at the benefit. Brian?
Yeah, well, just to speak in support of that, I think we will all agree that the cliff edge nature of this benefit is a disincentive to people. Actually, I always think the benefit system should always encourage people to work where they're able to, and they should get a reward of that, from that. And this actually acts in the opposite manner, that people don't want their employment to go above. And the recent rise in the minimum wage, the living wage, actually then put some people above the limit, so they were worse off from that increase. So I fully support that our call for the benefit to be redesigned. I expect the current design is just down to cost, that it doesn't need to be scaled, but it means that people hoping that they're under the threshold and maybe not knowing till the end of the financial year, and then when checks are done, it's discovered, oh no, that they've gone over the limit, and then they're having to pay back for a whole year. It's a very unfair system, and people unwittingly, just finding themselves on the wrong side of the limit. So, but at least there is an appearance here that checks are meant to be carried out regularly to prevent that circumstance. At least we have some detail on that. But I support that proposal.
Yeah, thank you, Ciara.
Just supposed to reiterate, I do think, and I welcome the department, and that they are working at pace with DWP in highlighting this issue and it to be dealt with. And so I do really appreciate the work of the department and what they're doing and giving this update, but I think we need the regular update, as you mentioned. I think a timeline on this, because this has been going on for years, and needs nipped in the bud. It's and it's not just even with this benefit, but in other benefits in relation to income. And as you say, at the end of the financial year, and then they realise they're over it, the system should be supporting, enabling and informing individuals on a regular basis as to where they sit and getting updates and better communication. So I appreciate the update, and I think we all reiterate the importance of this within the department. So timeline in particular, and anything that, if the department could regularly update us on what is the ongoing conversations and discussions with DWP, and if there's anything that we can do as well, and flagging it up directly with, as you say, an incoming minister with DWP, it should be done. And continually keep this on the agenda.
To ask for a 3-monthly update, a 6-monthly update?
I would assume maybe a 3-monthly update, even a written update, just to keep it. We need to keep this on the agenda on a continuous basis to see what can be done, because there could be ways, and I know the IT system and DWP, but is there other ways that it can be enabled whilst awaiting maybe changes that may take time to be implemented? Is there other things that can be done?
Even the feedback that I've received is the communication could be an awful lot clearer for those recipients of this benefit, particularly those who are becoming carers and who are new to the system. It's a really difficult, especially if your earnings fluctuate or if you're self-employed. If there's, I think if the department have a clear communication plan about this benefit in particular, would be great.
Yep. Okay, Claire, are you content?
Yeah.
Thank you, members. That's very useful. So, members, moving on then to table papers. At page 3, there's a memo from the clerk in relation to the defective premises bill, which is now listed in the motion schedule for debate on Monday, 3rd of June. In advance of the debate, you've been provided with the following papers, and that's for information for members. So there's legal advice has been put in there, a copy of the bill, and the department's written briefing. We also received a letter from the Federation of Master Builders and a letter from an individual regarding Victoria Square Apartments. I believe both those are we should forward those. Those are probably with the Minister anyway. This is the Minister in the department, so just forward to ensure that both those correspondence are with the Minister. Yep. Members content. Yep. Any of the other issues within that, members, any comment or members content to note?
Noted.
Thank you. Members, page 79 is a reply from the NIO in relation to the committee's queries about Casement Park. The committee had asked, in quotations, in the event that Euro 2028 does not go ahead here in the north, whether the current financial commitment from funding partners for the redevelopment of the stadium could be lost, putting the redevelopment out of reach. The reply states that the British Government is continuing to work closely with the Department and remains committed to ensuring Euro 2028 leaves a lasting legacy. So any comments on that, members? Ciara?
It's just obviously to reiterate, and we've reiterated on a continuous basis throughout the meetings, we all know the casement's going to be built. And obviously it would be a real missed opportunity to be hosting such a phenomenal event that would have such a huge impact not only on our communities, but just not even just on our communities, but the economy, community relations, tourism, etc., etc. So it's just about reiterating. We're going into recess in the next few weeks. We can't wait any longer. It needs to proceed. So it's just reiterating the fact that can the Minister now proceed, so we can ensure that such an amazing event can come and all our neighbourhoods and communities and our sporting fraternity and all can benefit.
Lisa?
And again, I just feel exactly the same way, just how significant the development of Casement will be to both the economy and to the community. And whenever I use the term community, I mean the whole community. It's encouraging to hear the likes of the British Prime Minister actually commenting that there's going to be a significant contribution in that to Casement, but I really do wish that it would become a whole lot more clear on that, and in terms of just even the time scale at the present time in order for working that to commence or to continue in the case of Casement as well too. And probably people cannot be blamed for having reservations about comments coming from even the British Prime Minister, because there's never any real certainty one way or the other. And given that we're moving into an election mode now as well, all the more reason why it is that he should step up to the plate and actually make our ministers here aware of what it is that they are contributing to this project, so it'll allow them to go ahead with it.
Yeah, sure.
No, and I'll follow on from both previous speakers. I think the frustration is palpable in both the football and the general sporting communities at the speed at which this is taking place. And I welcome the Prime Minister's significant, I think he's said significant 7 times in the question and answer with Jane McCormick from the BBC, but we still haven't got a figure, and I suppose I'm still unsure as to what comes first, the chicken or the egg. What comes first, knowing how much this project is likely to cost, or knowing how much the British government are willing to put into the coffers. So I think at the minute it just feels very much one is waiting on the other, and we still have those tender documents sitting ready to go out. So I'm still no clearer as to where the blockage lies.
Yeah, and I suppose I was struck in the recent announcement, but the very welcome announcement by the Minister around the sub-regional stadium and the boost that has given, and the morale boost even to soccer clubs, those grassroots clubs. You know, the idea that on top of that then you could be looking at the European champions and those footballers coming here to those young people's city, to those young people's region, and the further knock-on effect of that on grassroots soccer, and I have to agree in terms of the economy and community and all of that. I think it just would be such a shame, I have to say. And I'm wondering, even maybe in light of the fact that we're facing into an election and a cliff edge and around that, could we put one further push maybe and write again to the department and ask them to engage with the British and try to get this over the line in time to get Euro 2028 secured?
Can I just add, there was a further piece of correspondence that arrived after the packs have gone out, and there is further information from the Minister. It's in response to a request for the update on the budget, but it does respond to the specific questions we asked around why the tender for the redevelopment of Casement is not being advertised on a subject to funding basis. So there is some more information in there. I'm not sure if it would go as far as to address all of the concerns, but I can include that in the next set of information if you want to take a decision at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's Brian. Were you looking in?
No.
Okay.
Fine.
Okay. So members content then. We'll come back to that next week. Moving on then, to our agenda item 5, which is our first briefing, and that's a briefing this morning on Neighbourhood Renewal. So members, the papers for this agenda item start at page 25 there, and the department has also provided a hard copy report of the collaboration strategic framework, which has been distributed out and members have in front of them there. So as well as that, there are further papers at page 83 of your table pack. I now like to welcome the following officials to the meeting this morning. So we have Mr. Tony Murphy, who is Director of Community Empowerment Division. Also Colette Toman, who is acting head of the Business Innovation Team, and Nicola Cray, who is head of People and Place Review Team. So you're all very welcome, and thank you for coming along to this morning's committee meeting, and looking forward to hearing what you have to say. So could I invite you, I think it's yourself, Tony, to make a brief opening statement. 5 minutes if you can manage it, please, or as close to that parish, and we'll go in then to questions and answers. Thank you.
Okay. Chair, I had introductions, but you've gone through the introductions, so we'll move on. I'd like to thank the committee for the opportunity to update you on the Neighbourhood Renewal programme, the ongoing review of people in place, and the Collaboration Test and Learn initiative. By way of background, Community Empowerment Division has responsibility for the People in Place strategy, which was launched in 2003. The strategy is focused on urban areas and is delivered through Neighbourhood Renewal programme and includes small pockets of deprivation and areas at risk. The strategic objectives focus on community renewal, economic renewal, social renewal and physical renewal. 36 areas that received neighbourhood renewal funding were identified using multiple deprivation measures based on the data that was available when the programme was launched. They were considered to be the most 10% deprived areas across Northern Ireland. The other elements of the programme, small pockets of deprivation and areas at risk, were added later. So the small pockets of deprivation target small isolated pockets of deprivation that were deemed to be too small to be neighbourhood renewal areas, whilst the areas at risk target geographical areas outside the top 10 but were identified at risk of further decline. Taken together, the three programmes support around 230 projects working across 65 geographical areas with a combined population of 360,000. While most projects are delivered via the grant funding agreements with community groups, other projects are delivered in partnership with statutory bodies including NI departments, councils, education authority and so on. The budget allocated to the programme for 23-24 was 18.1 million, with an additional 1.19 million of capital funding provided to neighbourhood renewal groups. That included 500k that was distributed to 66 groups as part of a small capital grant scheme. With regard to the Department's 24-25 budget position, I understand the committee are due to receive a briefing next week from finance colleagues, and that a submission has also been prepared on June monitoring on the Department's bids. In terms of the implications for the Neighbourhood Renewal programme and the funded groups, it's not possible for me to provide any specific details at this time, as the Minister is continuing to consider the implications of the budget across the Department so that decisions can be communicated to the funded groups. The committee will be aware that the Minister moved quickly to provide funding assurances to neighbourhood renewal groups who received an interim budget allocation of 25% of their 23-24 budget. Those payments were issued to the groups at the end, early April. The Minister and officials recognise the critical role of the organisations and their staff play in supporting local communities and local groups. There's been regular engagement with officials and with representatives of the Neighbourhood Renewal Forum on the funding challenges. Those engagements have included meetings with the Minister, meetings with senior officials, as well as the head of the civil service, to discuss the challenges the organisations are facing when it comes to recruiting new staff and retaining experienced staff. The Minister met representatives of the Neighbourhood Renewal Forum on the 2nd of May to discuss their position paper, which I understand there was a presentation to the committee about. He recognised the important work in the services provided by groups funded by the Neighbourhood Renewal programme and the impact those services had not just on communities but in delivering interventions that supported services provided by other government departments, including health and justice. The Minister indicated that his intention was to take strategic directions around funding, ensuring programmes of excellence are properly supported and longer term solutions are put in place. Building and maintaining good working relationships with those involved in delivering the Neighbourhood Renewal programme has been a key element of the ongoing success of the programme, and one that has helped sustain services over the last number of years through COVID, the cost of living crisis, and through what have been very challenging financial times. The existing Neighbourhood Renewal grant agreements cover running costs, programme costs and a direct attributed to funded posts. In recent years, despite very challenging budget allocations, the Department has maintained the level of resources funding to neighbourhood renewal groups at around 18.1 million, and when possible has provided additional funding. That has included the fair funding package, which totaled 2.1 million in December 2021. It also included a payment of £1,500 per organisation in the spring of 2022, and further payments of £1,500 were made to the groups in January 2023. Minister also made the provision for an additional £1,500 to be made to groups in March 2024. In addition, in March 2023, the Department provided a one-off non-consolidated payment of £1,925 to organisations for each grant-funded post. In 2023, additional funding was secured to provide Neighbourhood Renewal funded organisations with the ability to meet their statutory requirements due to the increase in the national living wage, which went from £9.90 to £10.42. While additional grant funding has been provided to organisations to allow them as employers to meet staff costs for their employees that are directly involved in the delivery of Neighbourhood Renewal, the Department does not have any responsibility for setting terms and conditions for those employed by organisations. Members will be aware of the ongoing review of the People in Place strategy. The review is progressing well, with co-designed structures facilitating engagement with a wide range of key stakeholders across Northern Ireland, including the Neighbourhood Renewal partnerships. The work to develop the strategy, which will be an executive strategy, is ongoing, with the drafting of a strategic document taking place over the summer months. The draft document will be considered by the Minister in advance of it being presented to the Executive for further consideration. It is envisaged that a full public consultation exercise will take place in autumn, subject to the approval of the Executive. The review has identified core themes which include improving collaboration across government departments. Improving collaboration is a primary issue that has been fed back on numerous occasions, and it also reflects feedback that has been received by other government departments who have been working on tackling deprivation and associated issues. This led to the formation of the cross-departmental working group, which in turn developed the collaborative strategic framework which members have received. In September 2023, the NICS board approved the framework and included the potential for test and learn pilots to commence. The initial pilots commenced in the Diamond and in Auchnacloy in January 2024, and the evaluation workshops have been held there right up to the end of this month. The findings from the completed pilots are being collated and analysed and will be shared with participants in the pilot areas before they are reported to Minister and to the NICS board in July. The development of a new draft strategy will reflect the learning from the collaboration initiative and will be informed by the views expressed through the engagement with key stakeholders and officials. And officials ensure that the committee are kept informed of both the new strategy and the collaboration test and learn initiative. There's a few other things that have taken place around improving systems and processes. We can take that in the round in questions.
Yep. Okay, well listen, thank you very much, and I have to say it's an area I'm particularly interested in. I have seen some of the good work that some of the neighbourhood renewal schemes in my own area have, the like of New Community Hub in Dungannon, in Lisnahull, and other very, very worthwhile projects. So, and also just to say that I have taken part in the initial meeting of the Auchnacloy Test and Learn that you referred to there, Tony. So I suppose in terms of questioning, what's the initial feedback in terms of the test and learn, in terms of what value it might add to communities in a practical sense? Where are we indicating that might go?
I think where we're at is we'll have an evaluation report, but at the centre of this is collaboration. This is about government departments working together to improve processes, to improve the way we engage, to improve our systems, and to develop programmes in a more joined up way that would benefit communities, and in particular communities that are facing deprivation. So we would see some of the things that we're taking forward in terms of improving the like of monitoring and evaluation of impact, and we have an outcome-based assessment approach that has been piloted in neighbourhood renewal areas that covered 42 different projects, and we're just commenced at the start of April the rollout across all neighbourhood renewal projects. That gives us a real insight into not just the impact of the projects, but things like value added. So a key thing that we have been able to tease out of that is the amount of additional funding leveraged in to neighbourhood renewal areas by the groups. Another element that we can put a figure on is the value that volunteering has across the programme. So those, along with a new IT system that we're starting to pull together, which would look at automating the application process and the retention of information, and that would avoid duplication of effort. That would avoid groups being asked to send in their details 3, 4, 5 different times. So there is progress on a number of fronts, more work to be done. The pilot itself, Ochnacloy, you mentioned it, it has identified issues in both areas that are common, and then unique issues, given that one area is predominantly rural and the other area is city-based. And that'll be teased out in the evaluation report.
Okay, thank you. And could we look forward to at the earliest available opportunity an update on the collation of that analysis? So that will be interesting to see. The other thing is, committee have heard from neighbourhood renewal groups around staffing issues and difficulties they have with statutory and not being statutory in many cases. So you've mentioned there that you met with them recently. Has there been any progress made in terms of what I think were very clearly set out? I have to say, in tribute to the groups, they set out the issues very clearly and the proposed solutions. Can you give us an update on what progress has been made to narrowing the gap between what they're after?
Well, I think the key issue will be what the budget arrangements will be in terms of that, the level of investment that we currently put into the neighbourhood renewal and what we will get for the 24-25 year. We did cost out some of the options within the paper, so that ranged from about 2 million to up to 5 million on top of sustaining what currently is invested in neighbourhood renewal, the 18.1 million. So there are significant, I'm not going to say there's significant challenges in that there, so there is. But we do recognise that there is an issue around sustaining the sector. We value the sector, and we will work with them in terms of any flexibilities around the funding that we can deliver.
Yeah, well, I am glad to hear that, because they are clearly very aware of the issues, and they're very aware of the solutions, very locally focused in terms of solutions. Just in light of that, and in light of the success of some of the projects that have, is there any consideration at this stage being given to the criteria to allow smaller, maybe slightly more rural areas to benefit from a similar model, or an extension of this model?
I think the review is looking at the realisation that tackling deprivation isn't just restricted to where we currently invest in. The big issue for me there is a collaborative approach, an executive approach, because I suppose one of the recognised challenges of delivering neighbourhood renewal programme over the last number of years is that it's primarily through the Department for Communities Investment, and it was an executive strategy from the outset. And within that, that's where the collaboration piece starts to draw in.
Thank you. So I want to go on ahead to members then. So I have Brian, Melissa and Ciara at this point. Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
Go ahead first. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Tony and colleagues, for your attendance and presentation. I declared earlier I'm a member of the Greater Shankill Partnership Board. I've also a lot of dealings with neighbourhood renewal partnerships in North Belfast, and I worked a few years ago in South Belfast also. So I'm very aware of the benefit, of the neighbourhood renewal funding in areas of multiple disadvantage. It's very important upstream work, and if that work's not done, there are consequences further down the line if that capacity building is not taking place in areas at multiple disadvantage and at risk of becoming disaffected. It's important that there is community capacity and community structures in place for that engagement and partnership working. And I'm sure I certainly have experience of areas where don't have community infrastructure, and it makes it much more difficult to try and move forward positive initiatives within the area. I'm also mindful, Chair, just of the budget situation. I think the Minister bid for an extra 130 million this year and received only a tenth of that, 13 million, which was a real terms cut. And obviously there's some more funding now will be available shortly in the next monitoring round, and but again, just to speak for the importance of neighbourhood renewal among all those considerations, I have a few questions specifically. First of all, in terms of the groups receiving funding just for 3 months initially, have they now received funding letters for the rest of this financial year?
No,
They haven't. Still not.
they've received the letters covering up to the 30th of June,
Yes.
and the payments issued in April for community groups.
Okay. Well, I'm sure that's something we'll want to
We-
take up. If that's still the case. Is there any? When will the allocation for the rest of the year be made?
As soon as we're clear about the budget allocations for the programme,
Right.
and we will move as quickly as we can once that becomes
Yeah.
clear.
So effectively, groups are now back down to their last month, and
Yeah.
we heard.
And
Whenever the neighbourhood renewal partnerships were in, of the impact that has on staffing and retaining quality staff. Also, I'm aware I know sometimes a funding package is given, but in a lot of cases they are given funding for a particular job, and the job terms and conditions have been set some years ago, and I know there was some increase, which you explained there, around 21. But I'm told in some cases people on their terms and conditions are below the national living wage, and when they work it out, and of course quite often staff are doing hours above that. But is the department actually monitoring in terms of the funding contracts that go out to ensure that staff are at least receiving the living wage?
we don't monitor the contract as such. What we have done is we have moved to secure funding in year to provide support to groups who struggle to meet their statutory obligations under the national living wage. And I see that as being an issue with the recent increase, as it has gone from 1042 to 1144
Yes, it's
this
gone
year.
up
So
since.
it's quite a significant
Okay,
jump.
so groups who say, look, you've given us this funding attached to a certain post, and given the original terms and conditions, if they're below the minimum wage, the living wage, they can raise that directly with the department.
We have worked with groups to make sure that they can meet their statutory requirements.
Yes.
Has the department been proactive then in that? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Right,
Up
okay.
now, this year, because of the budget position, we haven't as yet looked at that. But in previous years, we have provided additional funding.
Okay.
In the last financial year, we looked to ensure that any posts that we funded were set at national living wage, which was the minimum.
Okay, well, certainly I'll raise that with groups who've raised the issue
Yes.
with me. Let me just see. In terms of, you make the point quite often in various, I'm on two committees here for different departments, and quite often one department is asked to take the lead on a particular initiative, which is meant to be cross-departmental. But when it comes down to the actual funding, what are other departments actually providing any funding? Neighbourhood renewal, people in place is meant to be cross-departmental approach, but do any other departments actually provide any funding towards it?
Not through the Neighbourhood Renewal Programme. Other departments may be operating in areas and tackling deprivation through different funding streams, but not directly through the Neighbourhood Renewal Programme. That comes through Department for Communities.
Yes.
And has there been any history in the past when other departments have actually provided funding directly for the Neighbourhood Renewal Programme?
Not in my time.
Yeah. Just staff time might be provided. Yeah.
I'm not.
Yeah, but
I would say. I mean, our staff work on the ground, and I think the groups recognise the efforts that the Neighbourhood Renewal staff make to stay engaged, and they do work with the groups. There is a close relationship with those groups. I've mentioned the payments there. Those payments went out in the last quarter of years, and right down to the finance team. They took on extra duties to get those payments out, rather than say, well, it's coming to the end of the year, we can't do this. So we make every effort, or have made every effort to support the groups.
No, the point I'm making is when something's meant to be cross-departmental, the lead department is left carrying the can financially, and whereas it's similar to anti-poverty work and so on. I mean, the issues that are trying to be addressed are cross-departmental, but other departments don't come up with the funding to enable.
I think, Brian, that's one of the things that the collaboration test and learn initiative is looking to address.
I think
Nicola can.
I think, member, you know, that's the key issue that you've put your finger on there. At the end of the day, prevention work, all of those things require everybody to work together across all of the departments, and the collaboration piece is really looking at how we can do that more effectively, including obviously a much more integrated approach around budgeting and how we can achieve that so that we can have that, you know, that much more preventative work that can happen. So, you know, I think it is going well. And, you know, the Executive Committee, which, you know, you're a member of, had received that briefing from the Head of the Civil Service. So I think there's a real opportunity to do that there, and hopefully that will make a real difference, you know, in the years to come.
Yeah. Okay. So
we have been at pains to, in putting together the collaboration test and learn initiative, and that we have done a fair bit of the heavy lifting on it, but we're at pains that this is not a DFC initiative, this is a cross-departmental initiative. And in my time, the working group, the cross-departmental working group, has actually stayed together now for well on 18 months with good representation at a senior level of the people, rather than people dipping in and dipping out. And I think, Colin, in Auckland, there was a good representation from other departments. It wasn't that it was just DFC. So very hopeful that with the support of the Head of the Civil Service and the Permanent Secretaries who endorsed this, that will see things improving. Not in every area, but certainly I think where there are common threads such as deprivation. It's a complex issue. It's not a one department, you know, matter.
Well, just finally, just welcome. You've answered. I was going to ask about the review of people in place. So you're saying the strategy will hopefully go out to consultation in the autumn, or the draft report on that, and finalised over the summer. So we'll hear more about that. And would it be possible to receive the actual maps for the three types of areas? I know they might be online or whatever, but whether we can see neighbourhood renewal, areas at risk, and small pockets of deprivation.
Send the link out to the maps, or
right.
Do you want hard copies? Because the link's probably
okay.
Okay, Brian, thank you. Melissa, Lanaray, Letterkesh, Letterhub.
I've got a Cahirla. Agus fáilte leg, you're all very welcome. Agus Wes Fanya the Ratchis Foster, and thank you for your statement as well too. I'm aware just of the good work that happens all within Neighbourhood Renewal, being a councillor previously at Irish City in Stavan, where I was very aware of what was happening on the ground there, and also feeling very jealous of the Neighbourhood Renewal programme. And I know that Colin was already alluded to it, because I come from the more rural aspect of the council area, and I wonder to what extent is it that, or is one just paying lip service to it at the minute, that other areas will be included under the Neighbourhood Renewal umbrella, and if they are, how does that then to impact on a budget that seems to be very, very limited now at the present time?
Yeah, the current Neighbourhood Renewal programme was an urban programme, and as you say, the budget is challenging as it sits. I think the issue around what the future looks like and what the people in place review document looks like is, in my view, needs to address deprivation wherever it is, but with that comes back to having collective responsibility for delivering improvements. And if it's rural deprivation sitting under an executive strategy, it's around cross-departmental cooperation to address those issues. So it is. It's not, to me, the strategy is not about taking the existing budget and then carving that differently and carving it up, and it's really about identifying the need and then seeing where the budget takes us for the collective need.
And when you use just the terminology urban-based, again, and I probably did know at one stage, how is that actually defined? Because within us, even our own area, we have fairly significant towns feel like that, rather than saying urban in terms of, let's say, 10, 15,000 of a population, the likes of it, but maybe more in the area of, let's say, 5,000, 6,000.
I think on the rural side it was about 5,000 was the general benchmark for that's considered to be a rural area. For Neighbourhood Renewal, the areas were identified using the multiple deprivation measures, which then identified those areas being as urban. So the 36 that still exist.
Okay. Cormac, Melissa, Ciara.
I very much welcome you all, and also I'm very passionate about it. I was there back in 2003 as part of the whole engagement as vice chair from 04 to 07, and then I was chair of a neighbourhood partnership up until 2021. And then obviously, so out throughout that, I've been there from the start and the end, and just before I left, I obviously was part of the original evaluation regarding the outcomes.
Yes.
And I suppose one of the recommendations from that, in speaking to the consultant who had done it, was obviously he was looking to ensure that a percentage was set aside so organisations could be supported in ensuring there's effective evaluation process, because it takes a lot of time and effort and resource, it's resource intensive to measure the impact, and we know that was a weakness in regarding the outcomes and stuff. So I really, really welcome the new IT system and looking to expand the government database, and I would love to be able to see a copy of the new outcomes. I'm not too sure if they're in the report, I didn't see them, but it'd be useful to see them.
Yeah.
But just a couple of questions. Definition of place, and it was mentioned regarding Israel and the multiple deprivation there and how that was targeted. They haven't been updated, and I have been contacting the Department of Finance and stuff as to it's critical they are. So I just at this moment in time would love to find out more regarding definition of place, what's been the conversations, and is there any changes given the fact that I think it's critically important, because in Israel stats, we had the Noble stats. I remember doing the analysis in Noble, we then have Israel that are really, really effective, particularly evidence and need. So a wee conversation on that. I'm conscious of the aware of the current structures that we have, the 36, and it was critically important. But as we mentioned, DFC investment, and that has decreased dramatically. And we're looking to review and develop 21 years later, when the budget's been slashed. Programming costs were basically done away with. But as you say, the resilience of the community voluntary sector and how they were able to, with such a small resource, bring the added value and the collaboration, and that was like collateral. So regarding the structures, do you see anything changing or moving there regarding the current structure, how it works, and how you can bed in other departments kind of bending their spend to invest in? Because my experience was the departments, when it came to tick from the budget, because obviously use core fund statutory bodies out of the Neighbourhood Renewal, whilst really great as a pilot to bed them into the process, but by now, whether it was health or councils, should really, they see the value of the fantastic work within the projects. How can we ensure this time? And I know it's maybe an executive decision and it needs to go to the executive table, but that really needs to happen, because that was the biggest kind of thing that didn't happen. So I'd love a wee bit about that. And then just the other wee thing, the cost of the IT system and the new IT system, is there any cost, or what's that going to be like? and then obviously finally, fair funding package. Obviously our previous Minister Deirdre Harkey included in. It was the first time in 10 years, and I really it made such a difference, because for 10 years we had workers had no salary increase. So it was really welcome, fair funding package, and I think that at least helped to consolidate the sector to feel finally, particularly even throughout the whole COVID and stuff, we're finally being recognised here. And then all of a sudden it's pulled from you, and are we going to end up back where we were again? Because the sector was at a critical point where they were losing staff. And I remember my own experience, staff, long-term experienced staff, were there basically on quite a nominal enough salary, but they were given that extra, but they were burnt out and they had to go and look for further security. So, and I'm used to annual an annual letter of offer for 10 years. You know, we want to get back to that 3-year budgeting. So any conversations there about 3-year budgeting, but I think it's critically important we need to consolidate that salary uplift again next year, regardless of the budget. So it's something we can write to the Minister ourselves on. We need to ensure that that's critically important, and we're continuing in a positive path. That's why, with regards to, it's not about other places coming in, and there are other areas, obviously, because you must constantly review, because there is tiny pockets elsewhere in our own communities, and areas of risk was good at picking that up. But just, there isn't enough money. And even within the current budget, it's going to be very tight even to secure salary uplift. We have to be real. So we're doing a full review. Whatever comes out of that review, we must double the actual current budget that's there. And that's across all departments, need to be invested in, whether it's health, whether it's justice, whether it's education. That's critically important, because, as I always say, the Maslow theory, hierarchy of need. You get that baseline right, where our local people and our local communities are in a safe space in a local community, have a roof over their head, and they have the connections and the engagement and a place to live. That then gives them that foundation to be able to thrive, whether it's getting a job, whether it's getting an education or something. And I think we need to, and I would encourage the department, and if we can do anything on the committee to encourage other departments, need to buy in to this review of people in place and strategy, because it would be really, really unfortunate that we have another strategy. We've done fantastic work, but how do we build upon it? And I welcome, obviously, the test and learn, and I'll be really, really keen to hear what comes out of those pilots as well, because that collaboration has happened, but it was driven by the community. It needs to also be driven by all our government departments with the community to be able to make a huge difference in our communities. But look, I welcome the work, and I know the staff within Neighbourhood Renewal, particularly that we have dealt with at a local level, have been absolutely excellent and worked really well, and can see the great work. But it's just that couple of areas. Definition of place, where are we at on that? What's your thoughts on the structures? How can they be improved to ensure that more effective collaboration with departments? What's the cost of the IT system coming forward? And then I just want to reiterate again that consolidating that salary needs to go forward. We need the staff, because there's no programming money. Where's the programming money going to come out of? They were totally cut over the years, so there's no programming money. It's basically Neighbourhood Renewal is just employing the staff. They then have to go themselves to seek the other resources to deliver programs. So, and finally, full cost recovery. Are we ever going to see full cost recovery? Look, I could go on, and I'm sorry I fired these at you, but thank you.
Can I thank the Deputy Chair for the longest question and most knowledgeably informed question ever. And I hope you've been taking notes, Tony, because you're going to have to
try and pick these up as we go. Money, if we can identify sources of more money, nobody's going to argue that there is a sufficient amount of money being invested there. I mean, I think everybody recognises it. The efforts of the people on the ground. I've been out around these groups. We've had Colin Boyle, Permanent Secretary, out around the groups. We've had the Head of the Civil Service out around the groups to hear firsthand the story, not just from the people delivering, but the people receiving and depending on those services. And I think that has worked in terms of people understanding the importance, and that's why over the last number of years decisions have been made within the department to protect the existing budget. Now, I know that doesn't go to the level of need in terms of what the groups need, but it was better than some of the programmes where funding was reduced significantly. Place, we've been working with Professor Brenton Murta from Queen's University, and he's done an excellent piece of work around place and deprivation and the importance of place and recognising what place actually means. In terms of defining the places, we are doing a bit of work around data. Now, you're right, multiple deprivation measure. The data is 2017, and we've been working with our statisticians around how we can better model where deprivation exists so that services can be targeted at that and funding can be targeted at that. The data, the issue with the data is the date of the data, you know, how far back it is. So the fair funding package.
Just on the data, but it is critically important. Using one domain is not, as you well know, it's not going to identify that this is an area, whether it's just income alone, because it's your health, it's crime. It's that combination that impacts on an individual and a family. So that's what I would just be concerned about, that it's just going to be one maybe measure like income, and it's seen differently and analysed differently, and we'll use that because it's critically important. I think multiple deprivation was good because you can see across, whether it's crime, access to services, all of that. It's that combination that really, really then entrenches poverty within a home and a family. So I just...
We have been exploring whether there was alternatives because of the multiple deprivation measures not being refreshed from 2017. But there's no suggestion that we're just going to use, in terms of moving forward, just one measure. It wouldn't, and I know there was discussions about administrative data and that, but that was looking at the modelling to see was there a better alternative out there. So as things stand, it would be multiple deprivation measures.
I think that's part still of the conversation, you know, that's going on, and obviously with a few more engagements with Neighbourhood Renewal and other stakeholders to explore that a wee bit more. I would say, you know, that ultimately, unfortunately really, whatever measurement you use, you tend to get very similar results. You know, deprivation expresses itself whatever way you want to measure it. So I think, you know, whatever measurement is you know, finally agreed upon by everybody, including the Minister, it probably will reflect what most members will probably know as areas are deprived. So, you know, that is the actual reality anyway, that unfortunately areas feature in whatever way you want to cut that data.
1 year funding cycles, it challenges everybody. So it does, and you know, having people going on to protective notice, and you touched on that and the uncertainty around that, and you know, the sooner we can move to multi-year funding cycles, the better. The cost of the IT, it is not as significant as it might sound, and I'm somebody who's worked in benefit systems and seen the knots going on in the back of things. At the minute, it's we have a budget of, last year's spend was 150 to develop a prototype, and we'll enhance that. This is off the shelf. This is not, you know, the system will be built so that it can be adapted and be flexible. We're not buying into something that every time you want to make a change or an amendment, then people start. So that is fair funding. Yes, you know, again, budget challenges and that we were able to provide a non-consolidated uplift of 1925. There is a piece of work going on with the joint forum around fair funding and looking at the wider piece, because I think fair funding is not just unique issue for Neighbourhood Renewal.
People is in the same.
It needs to be across the departments, the funding organisations, and the volunteering community sector. So there is a piece of work going on around that there.
And just to answer your question on the outcome based, it moved on a bit, Ciara, obviously, you know, when the consultant only led the foundation. And through the pilot then it was actually discovered that it's taken the organisations less time to complete this form of monitoring, and they really like it. They like it because it is evidencing very well what they do over and above what the original targets or outputs that would have been set by the department. And they're now able to use it as evidence towards other funding applications, which they think is really beneficial.
Oh, excellent, because I always felt that you're so busy delivering, and it's so hard to reflect the huge impact, because a lot of it is qualitative, it's about individuals. So that's great to hear. Thank you.
Did we miss?
Okay. Thank you. So, sorry, Sean, go ahead.
I can't add anything to Ciara's questions. It was just to check in that Professor Murda, the research that you're doing with Queen's. Is there a timeline for that?
We've actually just got the report, so we have.
Okay. Would that be able to be shared with the committee?
Absolutely, yeah.
Great. I would have to say, I was chairing the advisory group on that, and it's the first time I've been chairing a meeting where people clapped the presentation at the end of it. And that wasn't invited. They just thought it was so comprehensive, and it really hit home. And that group is cross-representative of the voluntary community and departments.
Brilliant. Look forward to reading them. Thank you.
Just on that to final bit over the summer, how's that going to, that consultation process going to take place? What's kind of, how are you going to go about that? Or so if we're about, we'll attend.
I think it's around us socialising some of this material across. The collaboration piece challenges the way government operates, because we need to get this to all the ministers at the same time. We need to make sure that everybody is signed up to that to keep them on board. We have to go back to the Northern Ireland Civil Service Board, because they commissioned that piece of work on the end of July.
30th of July.
We're aligning those. We need to get a document ready for to put to the executive through the minister that would look like a consultation document as well, to take that and get the approval. So we will, I mean, we can make arrangements to get documentation sent through to members.
That would be useful as you go, just to keep informed and engaged on it.
There's that, making sure everybody is aligned to the time scales and we can share it. But yes, happy to share it.
Just to add, we have a strategic insight lab next week, which is probably an opportunity for all our stakeholders again to participate, and that will probably be one of the opportunities to draw all this together in a way. So, for instance, Brendan's report, other pieces of information and evidence that we have, including, I know he had mentioned about structure, so we have some very good case studies on what makes a good structure. So, Shankill Partnership is an evidence of one, as is a lot of the structures in Derry. So what are the components that make those good? So that will be some of the learning. So we have that next week, and then, as Tony says, we'll be drawing all of that information together over the summer period, including the evaluation stuff.
No holidays.
So is that Innovation Lab connect to Test and Learn? That following that strands of that? Or?
So it's for the review, but obviously Test and Learn has become very much part of that review. So both of the elements will be discussed in that.
I would have thought the Test and Learn started as a bit of a distraction to the review. It is actually now looking at a core element of the review because of that cross-departmental connection and the collaboration piece, which has been fed back multiple times in the focus groups and on that. Sorry, Brian.
Ryan, a brief one, please.
Yes, I just want to ask you again, in the immediate term, groups waiting to know what's happening, their funding, tell me again what answer I can give to them.
As
given
soon as
they've only a month left of their current funding contract.
Yeah, we are working on options in the background that we would put to the minister, but ultimately the budget decisions is where you then move this into for the rest of the financial year. Right. So as soon as those are made, I mean, we're geared up to move as soon as we know, and we will work with the groups.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Brian, something that we can take up on committee then.
We are cited, and we started work in January because we've been around this over 1 year cycles, and we know. I mean, we're out
years.
with.
Oh no, I know it's like this, but it's
15 years.
But anyway, it took me bad at the moment.
Yeah, we were in a similar position last year, where we had to operate a similar system.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
You provide the committee with an update when that clarity starts to, when that clarity emerges.
I think the briefing I'm hoping the briefing from finance colleagues next week will shine some light on then the next steps, and we will be ready to move with letters of offer, with the arrangements as soon as we can. We get the issue around being on protective notice, and then we're in June.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, well listen, thank you very much, and I have to say I do get a strong sense of engagement, of commitment, and of connection with and passion for the area, and that's very useful, because I think this is where we get a lot of value out of these types of initiatives. So I want to thank Tony, Colette and Nicola. Thank you very much for your attendance here this morning, and I wish you all the best in the time ahead. Okay, thank you. Okay, members, so are there anything emerging from that members wish to flag, or have you sort of been able to keep a track of what committee are?
Yes, I've kept track
Clerk.
of the actions, So one was providing committee with the next steps when they move with the letters of offer. And we can keep a lookout for that next week when we have the budget briefing. Committee asked for the report of the research with UB. So we've noted that as well. And everything else I think was actioned. I've no other.
Okay, so if members are content, we'll take maybe a short break here now, and then we'll go back to our session. So if members could come back, be ready to roll at 11:20 there, if even a wee bit before it, we can get things underway. Thank you, members. So we'll take us out of public session, please.
Committee Room 29. Sound. 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 Committee Room 29, 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 Sound.
she confirmed open.
Okay, thank you, members. So we're picking up at agenda item 7 there, which is correspondence. I refer members to the correspondence memo at page 37 of your meeting packs. Do members have any comments in relation to any of the items of correspondence? And I note there that there is a request in from Development Trusts NA to brief the committee. Are members content that we schedule a briefing from DTNA? Yeah, members content, thank you. And then there are several items to note. Are members content to note, or any comment they wish to make? No?
It's good to see we made the Tyrone papers.
Yeah, well, yeah, that was actually very positive coverage. And you know, not only did it get coverage in the press, but actually quite a few people mentioned it to me, just people I met on the street. And I think there was a sense of this was the Assembly coming out into communities, closer to communities. Very practical engagement with the community, so I think it's something that we should maybe consider doing further initiatives like that.
That's what I was just going to come in on. I think it was really, really good and effective, and the more outreach we do, the better, and the more they recommend if anybody would like to come to Derry and Foyle. I would be happy to work with the clerk to facilitate if we could squeeze it in. I don't know if we could squeeze it in before the end of this mandate, but
I think certainly we could, but we could look at in the autumn maybe doing a session and maybe something on housing, or but there's something specific.
Well, specifically in the housing, I think it was really good. We have a collective of organisations, and particularly supporting people. And we know that it's been a huge issue, but also a range of homeless organisations, etc. And they would be really, really keen to maybe host ourselves, or even if it's a study visit and going out round and visiting a few groups. Because I know that's what we've been doing. We've had 3 through the Department of Justice study visits, and they're really, really, really good. So if it's a study visit or hosting a committee meeting, either or.
Sean?
Yeah, we just going to agree. Absolutely, I think it's something that I think is really positive, particularly for the type of community or the type of committee that we are, to actually get out there and hear firsthand. And I think it does make the work that we're doing more approachable to people. And also I got some very positive feedback from Alliance members in Tyrone that they saw me in their local paper. I think that's a bit of an anomaly for them, but yeah, I think it's a really positive thing, and I'm more than happy if you ever want to come to North Antrim to do the same. But yeah.
Thank you. Daniel, I'm not sure if you're still just hearing us there, but I think you'd indicated, Daniel, you were looking in on this. So I'll come back to Daniel. Check, Brian, were you looking in?
No, I'd already comment.
Yeah, thank you. So I think we might have just lost Daniel there at that juncture. I'll give it another few seconds, and if not, we can pick it up again, maybe in AOB, whatever his comment was. No confirmation. No. Okay, members, so I'll move on. Right, so we'll have Daniel back on screen now. Daniel, were you looking in there?
No, just to echo what other members have said, Chair, in relation to the outreach, I think it is important. Given that casement is so high on our agenda in terms of our concern as well, and it was raised earlier, a visit to the site may do no harm as well to show a very keen interest in relation to from the committee anyway, and also just to give us a bit of an insight as well.
Yep. Members content with that? Yeah, thank you. Okay, members, moving on then to item 8, which is the forward work programme. Members, you'll find there at page 48 the documents in relation to this. Do members have any comments, or are they content to note the forward work programme? If I could just draw one issue to members' attention. So we are scheduled for a meeting on the 4th of July. That's the date of the general election. So it may create challenges for us to have a meeting. So would members agree that maybe we should look at cancelling that meeting in light of the...
Agreed.
And we will, members agreed, thank you. Okay, thank you, members. Final item then, or agenda item 9, second penultimate item is any other business. Is there any other business today members wish to raise? No, thank you. Final item then is agenda item 10, which is date, time and location of the next meeting. And our next meeting will be at 10 a.m. on Thursday, 3rd of June, 2024, here in room 29 in Parliament Buildings.
6th of June, is it?
6th of June, sorry, I have the 3rd on my note. Thursday, 6th of June, members, in room 29. So the meeting is now adjourned, members.
Committee room 29. Sound. Committee Room 29, 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 Sound. Committee Room 29.